100% Putin stalling. It's interesting the order that things happened. We had the Americans meet the Russians in Saudi Arabia, and there was a lot of furor around Ukraine not being there, but nothing really of substance came out of that. Then we had that debacle in the Oval Office between J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and President Zelensky. That set everything back. And then we've had the Ukrainians and the Americans meeting in Saudi Arabia and coming up with an outlined peace plan, which is similar, I think, to what Zelensky had presented even before Donald Trump was inaugurated. But it ironed out some of the detail, including this immediate 30-day ceasefire. And then that's presented as a fait accompli almost to Vladimir Putin. And it's Putin's to lose. Donald Trump and Marcus Rubio said the ball is in Putin's court. It's in the Russians' court. And Putin has done, he's been caught where he can't really maneuver. So he's trying to buy time. And he's done that by saying, yes, I accept a ceasefire. However, these are my conditions. That's typical Vladimir Putin. Putin ultimately wants to achieve something that he can call a victory back to his people. And to him, that victory is not just freezing the front line where it is at the moment. He wants the whole of the Donbass. So he wants all of the oblasts, the areas he has failed to capture in the last 3 years. And therefore, he's trying to do that because he would use that then as a stepping stone to then further salami slice Ukraine in the future whenever he can refurbish his troops and come back again. He wants guarantees that Ukraine is not going to be in NATO or that there are not NATO troops inside Ukraine, because that would stifle his future ambitions of trying to salami slice further parts of Ukraine at some stage in the future. He doesn't want Ukraine to be in a position to be able to refurbish their military. He wants Ukraine to demilitarize because Russia on paper was the second most powerful military in the world, and it has been held back by the equivalent of David and Goliath with the Ukrainians. And Putin needs to sit back, lick his wounds, look at that and see how he can move forward in the future. So he doesn't want anything that's in the Zelensky-Trump peace plan. He wants to set his own conditions. He thinks he's got Donald Trump on his side. And the other thing that Putin will do is, if he can delay it, he will use that time to try and create additional fissures between the United States and Ukraine, the United States and the EU, UK and the EU, UK and the US. He will do everything he can from his geopolitical maneuvering to try and cause more difficulties, and then difficulties inside the United States itself, and then potentially even stimulate other mini conflicts popping up in different parts of the world to try and take people's focus away from him and away from Ukraine. So the longer that he can buy, the better, because Putin, I think, is concerned if Donald Trump does to him what he did to Zelensky and comes in with very hard sanctions, which would destroy the Russian economy. If those sanctions came in on top of what's there already, but took proactive effort against the shadow fleet of tankers that are still keeping the oil trade moving for Russia and still allowing Russia to finance its illegal full-scale war into Ukraine. So Putin, I think, is worried. Well, if he came out publicly and said no, he'd have backed Donald Trump into a corner where Donald Trump would have had to hit him with very heavy economic sanctions and possibly more. So yes, Putin is backed almost into a corner. He's got some maneuver room, but what he's trying to do is buy time so that he can test his options and see what's the best route for him to take. So the coming days and weeks are going to be fascinating. Kursk is part of it. Putin was severely embarrassed that the Ukrainians managed to walk into parts of Russia, and interestingly, it's a lot of the people in that part in the Kursk region speak Ukrainian rather than Russian. But that's an aside. But Putin was severely embarrassed, and it brought the war home to average Russians when they hadn't heard about it beforehand, because Putin could control the press about what was going on outside Russia. It's important to think for him to take Kursk back again. He's been at it for months and months and months now, and it's only whenever the US managed to turn off the intelligence support for Ukraine and the long range weapon support for Ukraine that the Russians clearly had a plan waiting, and executed that plan and have virtually pushed the Ukrainians out. How much of that's the Ukrainians being pushed out? How much is that the Ukrainians going, we need to withdraw because this is costing us too much time and effort? Kursk was a bargaining chip for Ukraine. It's a relatively minor bargaining chip, but it was a big issue for Vladimir Putin. And if he can push the Ukrainians out, he will take that as a victory. He doesn't want, and this is part of the reason why he's delaying at the moment. He doesn't want a ceasefire which freezes front lines where Ukraine still occupies part of Russia. Putin will agree to a ceasefire if it's on his terms. And if he can get the language in such a way that it is so flexible, he can interpret it in his terms, if that allows him to buy time. Because Putin needs time. His military is suffering hugely at the moment. His economy is suffering. We're seeing night after night massive Ukrainian drone attacks across Russia, hitting Moscow and hitting elsewhere. Putin knows that the war is coming to Moscow, and that's something he does not want to happen. So he will want to come up with something, I think, but it's going to be totally worded in a way that he can interpret it his way. And is it going to last? No, I don't think so.